So this is, I think, like the fourth time I've tried making this video. The third time was just horrible because I forgot to turn my mic on. So I sounded like a robot. I guess I was getting picked up by my webcam mic. But anyways, this is why I don't like the new Fantastic Four movie. Spoiler alert, by the way, if you care to see the movie, maybe don't watch this video. But I'll try my best to keep it spoiler free. I know that I'm probably going to get into some minor, maybe major spoilers, depending on how you feel about spoilers later on. Honestly, the plot is pretty simple, so, I wouldn't say it's crazy, but there might be some spoilers later on. So getting into the number one thing I did not like about this movie was the writing, and particular the dialogue. I do not like the dialogue, and there's a lot of it, and there's a lot of bad dialogue, and honestly, there really was not a lot of good dialogue. There are some good things about this movie. I will talk about those. The dialogue is not one of them. The dialogue, like I said before, is pretty bad. The jokes do not land. Honestly, the only part that I laughed during the movie was one of the more serious parts of the movie. Maybe that makes me an asshole, but the dialogue was just not good. The jokes didn't land. There's a lot of jokes that get cut into. There's a lot of jokes that cut into the more serious parts of the movie, as Marvel's kind of known for, and superhero movies kind of known for now in general. This movie still does that. I think it does it a little bit less, but it does happen, and it does really bring the movie down. And just the writing in general, the dialogue is not very good. The jokes don't land. Especially beginning of the movie, there's a lot of dogging on the Human Torch, and I mean, this is kind of a lower point because I understand that maybe the point of the movie is that the Human Torch, first of all, I think is probably the best character in the movie. I do like that they made him smart because he is smart, but I don't like the fact that the rest of the Fantastic Four don't really acknowledge that, and they kind of treat him like trash in the beginning, and they don't really acknowledge. I mean, there's kind of a mystery, and he's kind of the first one to kind of dig into this mystery, and most of the Fantastic Four, all the Fantastic Four, really don't care, and that really, and they dog on him for it, and that really pissed me off, and I understand that may be the point of the movie, so I will say that is a lower point, but that was kind of the first thing that I noticed about the writing and the dialogue, and that kind of continued on throughout the movie. Sue Storm, she does a lot of screaming and grunting in the movie. There's one scene in particular, kind of towards the beginning, maybe towards the middle, where she's giving birth, and I understand childbirth is it hurts. I understand it's a very painful process, but the way that she's going about it, it just seems fake. It doesn't land. It's not very good. And when she's using her powers later on in the movie, she's screaming and crying and grunting a lot, and it's just over and over and over again, and it's not very good. Another thing that I noticed really early on in the movie, and again, this is a lower point, but it's where they take off in the rocket ship to go and confront Galactus. The ship takes off like how a rocket ship should take off, like a realistic rocket ship. But then when they go to Galactus's planet, or I guess not his planet, but they go to see Galactus, the rocket ship all of a sudden turns into like a TIE fighter from Star Wars and starts zooming around in between rubble and stuff. And it's just like, where was that? Like, why didn't they take off that way? Why is it like that? And I understand it's a superhero movie, and I'm digging probably deeper than I should be. I should not be thinking this hard about it, and that is why it's a lower point and why I'm talking about it first. But it did kind of rub me the wrong way, and I was kind of like, what the hell? And then when the rocket lands, it lands like a rocket ship, like how a realistic rocket ship would land, and it's just like, I guess one of the things I should say is that while watching the movie, and definitely after the movie, I realized this movie is for kids, and there's nothing wrong with that because it's a superhero movie. But one of the other superhero movies that I watched recently, Superman, is a really good example of a movie that can be for both kids and adults. And that movie's great. I love that movie. And I don't think there's anything wrong with Fantastic Four necessarily being made purely for kids. But one of the problems with it is that the Fantastic Four is such an old OP and, an old IP. And one of the things that I think drived a lot of the hype for this movie was the fact that it's such an old IP and a lot of older people are coming to watch it. They want to relive the memories of the comic books or the older movies and whatever. And so, but I really think that they really missed out on capturing the older audience. I definitely wasn't captivated by it. The writing in particular, I just thought was very childish and just wasn't very good in general. Another thing I didn't like about the movie was surprisingly the lack of fight scenes or the lack of scenes with Mr. Fantastic using his powers. I think he has a pretty badass power. I like his power. His power is mostly just played off for a gag, and he's just the genius, and he is a genius, and that's probably the greatest thing about him. But his superpower is pretty badass too, but they never really use it other than for gags until like the very end. I think there's a few scenes, like there's a flashback where he's using his powers to fight Mole Man or whatever, but for the most part, they really don't show his powers at all, and it's really kind of lame, and I really wish that they really used his power more often, because he has a pretty badass superpower, and I think they kind of missed out on that. With Mr. Fantastic, along those lines, one of the things that I was really disappointed about in this movie, or not disappointed, but I was disappointed at first and before seeing the movie, was Pedro Pascal being casted for Mr. Fantastic. I saw the Doctor Strange 2 movie, and that was a terrible movie, but one of the things that I liked about the movie was that they had John Krasinski being cast as Mr. Fantastic. And I love John Krasinski, and I thought that they would have brought him back and made him the Fantastic Four, but I think they just put Pedro Pascal in there because he's a bigger name, especially right now, even though there's kind of some controversy and stuff like that with him. I might make a whole nother video about that. But with that being said, I don't think Pedro Pascal was horrible. I think the writing was horrible. I think they could have done a better job with casting, but you can't deny he's a good actor, and I think he did the best with what he had. And I think that's kind of the benefit of casting these bigger actors, even though I don't think they're right for the roles. I know the first movie that I watched that really put me onto this, even though going back, I think this has really been a problem since the beginning of, Hollywood. This has always been a problem, was the Mario movie, right? You have Chris Pratt Chris Pratt plays Mario in the Mario movie, which doesn't make any sense because he's not Italian. But this just shows like they're really just picking actors for the name and not whether they really fit the role or not. Even though I think Pedro Pascal does a good job, I think they could have done better, but I was surprised. I do think he's a decent Mr. Fantastic. He's not the worst option. Another thing that I didn't like about the movie was some of the CGI. So one of the good things about the movie was that it looked decent. Like there was a lot of cool scenes, like especially early on, where it's showing the kind of old 60s influence, and I thought that was cool, right? But there is some pretty bad scenes of CGI, that got a laugh out of me. That made the movie kind of look goofy, right? Like there's a scene where the Human Torch is chasing after the Silver Surfer character, and it's really bad CGI. But I don't know. I mean, it's what are you gonna do, right? Another thing that I guess I kind of liked about the movie was Galactus, his character, and they did a good job at making him pretty badass and overpowered, except when he gets to New York. I don't know how lore accurate it is. I thought, Galactus was going to be like this huge character that towers over the planet, but he was really small. I feel like they sized him down, and I understand they had to do what they had to do for the plot reasons, but I do feel like they missed out on making Galactus this, huge, imposing character, even though he is still pretty badass and overpowered. In the end, like I said, spoiler alert, Sue Storm pushes Galactus into this teleporter, and I mean, obviously, if he was bigger than the planet, that wouldn't be possible. But with that being said, that final fight scene is another problem that I have with the movie, is that it just didn't make any sense. So, again, spoiler alert. When they go, the final fight scene, Galactus comes down to Earth, and he wants Sue Storm and Mr. Fantastic's baby. So they devise this plan where they're going to put this baby in the middle of Manhattan. I think it's Manhattan. And they're going to go to get the baby, or Galactus is going to go to get the baby. And then they distract Galactus, and they swap the baby out for like a fake, and then he grabs the fake one, and then they teleport him to like across the universe, right? So, first of all, that scene doesn't even make any sense, because early on, and they're showing how they're trying to teleport an egg, and they can't even do it. Like, I don't know how they go from teleporting an egg to, first of all, they try to teleport the whole planet away, and then that fails. But I'm like, how do you go from teleporting an egg to teleporting the whole planet? Whatever. I guess I have to suspend my disbelief. It's a superhero movie, but it was kind of ridiculous. Anyways, they fail because I guess they did it too early. Like, Galactus is walking into the teleporter, he realizes it's a fake, and then he steps back. Like, why didn't they wait for Galactus to walk into the teleporter before swapping the baby out and then teleporting him away? So that causes the whole end fight scene, and then Sue Storm is pushing Galactus into the teleporter at the last minute. I don't know, because there's a weird time that has to go on the teleporter, and so they turn it on and they have to wait for it, and then she's pushing him back, and she's screaming and crying and grunting the whole time. But it was kind of like, it didn't make any sense to me. And I understand they have to drive it up with the, they're trying to make it, I guess, eventful, or they're trying to make it, what's the word I'm looking for? The tension, right? They're trying to bring up the tension, but it was just kind of ridiculous. I thought The Thing had some decent scenes. Again, the CGI wasn't that good. The writing was the worst part of it, though. The dialogue was awful. And the MCU, in my opinion, is going to be in trouble if they don't figure out how to write dialogue. Again, this is a problem that they've had like for a long time, where they have this goofy, silly scenes that just don't need to be there. And again, I understand it was for kids, but it does get to the point of being a little bit ridiculous. Overall, I think I would give the movie like 4 out of 10. I guess I like some of the scenes. It has a good look to it. Pedro Pascal was decent, and that's really it. I mean, that's really pretty much it. Like, I think the writing, the dialogue, maybe that's something that I focus on too much when it comes to movies, but to me, that's like one of the core parts of a movie, and this movie just did not land. So, yeah, if you don't agree with me, dislike the video, or comment down below why you disagree. If you like the video, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.